I have a long history of the Bible. I was born with the Bible practically in one hand. My father was a pastor, and my mother was a Sunday school teacher, and we lived very much within the biblical framework, culture, narrative, images, theology, and so on in our family. I had the opportunity to go to Israel for the first time. I think it was about 5 years ago, at the invitation of my friend Henry Abramovich, who lives in Jerusalem. We're both Yale graduates, and he's a Jungian analyst living there. And I was surprised at the impact of visiting the places that I had lived with in my imagination, and in story and sermon and the world of the church, actually to experience the geography of the place and to visit, for instance, a site that is known as the Inn of the Good Samaritan on the road to Jericho. And I was overcome with emotion when I was there because I'd heard that story so many times in my childhood, and my father preaching about it and so on, and to be there and actually see that there was such a physical place on earth was both a surprise and a kind of numinous experience. So the book is called The Bible as Dream, and I just want to say something about the idea behind this title and behind my approach and my methodology, because it's specifically Jungian. There are many interpretations of the Bible, and this is a psychological one based on Jungian psychology. Actually, the Bible has, and interpretations of the Bible and reflections on the Bible, has a significant place within Jungian literature and the Jungian world, starting with Jung himself, who was deeply immersed in the Bible as I was. He also grew up in a parsonage. His father and grandfather were Protestant ministers. He had 6 uncles who were Protestant ministers, and the Bible was their daily bread, as you can imagine. And I was told by one of his grandsons that Jung always carried a small Bible in his pocket when he went back and forth and on his travels and so on. If he had a little time, he would open it up and read a passage. So he also lived with the Bible, and he wrote about it, many references to the Bible, biblical characters and so on in his writings. And importantly, in the Red Book. Red Book is full of biblical references, Elijah, Salome, so on. These are characters drawn from his experience of the biblical text and the biblical world as he experienced it in his life. Human beings have been dreaming and talking about their dreams for a long time and interpreting dreams. And you find a number of important dreams recorded in the Bible, dreams of Pharaoh, for instance, dreams of various biblical characters. Dreams are messages, guides, have been taken as such. In modern times, we don't think about them so much that way. Neuroscience has studied the dreaming brain, and we know that during REM sleep, the brain is very active. It's doing something. The neurons are firing in certain parts of the brain. Other parts of the brain are not active. Certain parts are turned off, and others are turned on. But neuroscience doesn't tell us anything about the content of the dream. It tells us about the physiology of the dreaming brain. But what about the content? A view of the dream, ancient view, was that dreams are messages from God or the gods. They are letters or information or guidance sent by powers that be in the other world and in a transcendent world. In Jungian psychology, we sometimes take dreams as guidance. We certainly consider that possibility because we look at dreams as having important information about the unconscious mind and its relationship to our lives and our consciousness. And sometimes we use them for guidance to suggest certain ways of thinking, feeling, acting. Jung looked on dreams as compensatory to the conscious attitudes. So if you take the dream into account, you have a greater sense of a greater awareness and greater consciousness, at least about yourself and maybe even about other people in the world. You can also look at the Bible from a subjective interpretive perspective, and I do that quite a lot in my book. And the subjective level takes all the parts of the dream as aspects of the dreamer, subjective aspects of the dreamer. So that if you dream about somebody else, particularly unknown characters, this is true of, we work with it this way in analysis, you say, well, what part of you is that? So you dream about a really nasty person mistreating somebody or mistreating you, somebody you really don't like. Well, what part of you is that? Oh, we say, that's a representation of the shadow, isn't it? How is your shadow like that? And then you start reflecting on it that way. Is it the opposite of your persona? You have a very different persona, a very different self-image, but there's a part of you that's like that, and so on. If it's a male dreamer and dreams about a woman, we say, well, is that an anima figure? Is that a soul figure? Is that a part of your anima, your inner world, not a reflection of the world around you outside? You're not dreaming about a person outside yourself. You're dreaming about an aspect of your own self, the greater self. Greater self is made up of all these parts. It's a mandala. It has masculine, feminine, good and bad, shadow and persona. At the center of it is a mysterious force called the self that we allow to remain a mystery. We can't know too much about it, but it's a guidance system for the whole setup of our psyche and our character. So if you treat the Bible on a subjective level, then you look at the figures in the story and the interactions as a part of this collective psyche of the chosen people.